So after about 15 ski videos in a row, I decided to go ahead and do an informational videos. Those seem to be the most popular. So here it goes. Let me start with a disclaimer. I am not an expert in real estate, particularly French real estate. But we have purchased a home in France. We've lived here for 5 years, and we've also purchased a little vacation apartment, and been through another couple of real estate purchase processes which did not result in ownership of the property. First, how to find a property. The sources that I have used, and it's evolved a little bit, but I think Bilingual, spelled L-E-B, I'll put the list, the spellings in the subtitles here. That's been kind of evolved into our go-to. It seems to have the most product, and the product gets on the website pretty quickly. It's an all-purpose kind of website like Craigslist in the US, but it has a pretty robust real estate section, and real estate agencies all seem to list their property there as well as in their other places. There are also a couple of aggregator websites that can be useful. One that's been that I've used in the past and resulted in our purchase of the beach apartment. That's called BNEC. Or BNEC, I'm not sure of the pronunciation. And another one that's pretty robust is called C'est Loger. Again, not sure of the pronunciation. But in addition to those, if you have a particular area of interest, I think it's useful to kind of figure out who the dominant real estate agencies are that are selling in that area, and go to their websites. And you may see product there that you don't see in the other sites that I mentioned. One of the ways that you can find out what real estate areas are, focusing in an area is starting at Bilingual and seeing what agencies have listed in Bilingual for property in that area that you're looking. In the three online sources that I mentioned, you can list the area that you're looking for or in, and there's also a number of other filters, price range, and so forth that you can use to narrow the scope of your search. I will tell you, in some of the more remote communities, there are properties that aren't listed anywhere online. You we'll find them simply by walking the neighborhood, and you'll see a sort of a crudely made sign. Now, that's not real common, but I have seen that in a couple of the mountain communities. My next tip is, if you are a buyer, don't use a real estate agent. The seller's most likely going to have a real estate agent. We signed up with a real estate agency to help us in our search for our primary home. It was very awkward. The seller and our agent and the seller's agent got kind of in a fight about sharing the commission, and it just kind of became clear to us that it wasn't a common arrangement for the buyer to have an agent. In addition to that, the agent just didn't add much to she just wasn't very helpful. There wasn't much that she was able to do that we weren't doing on our own anyway. In contrast, well, let me back up a little. One of the things that are unique to France compared to the US is the use of notaires. Notaires, they're not notaries in the US sense. They are kind of halfway between a lawyer and a real estate agent, but that is one where, as a buyer, I think it is useful to have your own notaire, and the notaire will split the fees with the seller's notaire. But they can really go to bat for you, and they really can warn you of some things and educate you about some things in the transaction. They don't usually step in until you've picked out a property, but that's when they become really useful. And that's also why you don't really need a buyer's real estate agent. Now, contrary to the U.S., the list price isn't all-inclusive. There's essentially a 8% tack on to whatever the price that you've agreed to buy the property, and that is the notaire fees, which includes a bunch of government fees. So the notaires really don't actually get that much of that 8%. But you know, put that into your budget. Whatever you're going to spend on that home, add 8%. And that 8%, by the way, has been increased a 0.5% this year. There's some places still that haven't added it, but it was, I think it was 7.5%, and now it's increased to 8%. Now, the real estate process, I think, gives an advantage to the buyer compared to the U.S. And one of those advantages is the you can't in France you can't bid up a property like you can in the U.S., where they in you know, hot areas or in-demand homes often will sell for more than the list price, because the people wanting the property are offering more than the list price. In France, if you offer the list price, the listed price, the seller has to accept. Now that comes with a couple of caveats. The seller could get a couple of offers to buy at their asking price at the same time. It doesn't have to be exactly the same time. It could be, you know, if the seller hasn't responded to you right away and then gets another offer in the same sort of general period, they can pick between the two. So we recently got beat out on a property because for us it was going to be a vacation mountain home, and we were going to spend quite a bit of time there in the winter, but also do some short-term rental when we weren't using it. And it was in a little mountain village, and that's what the property was. Just in our own defense, that's what it was being used for like 20 or 30 years before we came along. But the other buyer purportedly was planning to live there full time, and the seller liked that. And to be fair, I think that's a good thing. A lot of these villages have had their local population replaced by short-term rentals. It's not really gentrification so much, in the sense that they're not, the local population isn't being forced out. Maybe in some ski areas they are, but generally not in these mountain villages. It's just that the mountain families, the children tend to like to move to the cities and where there's more economic opportunity. So that's left, a lot of the mountain villages sort of empty of their pastoral families and way of life. And so it's good when you have somebody that wants to live there full time. So no hard feelings on that one. It was a good thing for the village. Another advantage that a buyer has is, even if you get selected, you offer the price, you and the seller agree to a price, and you get selected to buy it, and you enter a preliminary purchase agreement, which is referred to as a compromis de vente, or also a promesse de vente, I think it's pronounced. Anyway, the buyer then has a 10-day period to change their mind and back out, no questions asked, and get their full deposit back and everything. So it's just a 10-day kind of cooling off period that the buyer has. So that means, even if you are, you have a little bit of uncertainty, it's important not to abuse the process, but it's probably it behooves you to go ahead and make the offer, and then if it doesn't if it's a property that you might lose to somebody else because it's in demand, then there's that one you can use to your advantage. Now, another thing you can use to your advantage is that if you can buy the property for cash and somebody else offers the asking price, but it has a financing condition, then typically the seller is going to choose you, the cash buyer. On the same hand, don't necessarily assume that as a foreign buyer you won't qualify for financing. We did qualify for financing. And I've gone through a couple of processes since then, and the first time we used a kind of a what would you call it, I want to say headhunter, mortgage hunter, somebody, or it wasn't a loan broker. They worked for a fixed fee, but they seemed to have a relationship with some banks and were able to find us a bank to help us finance our primary residence, and that was very helpful. My experience with the banks afterwards, trying to find one on my own, has been less successful. So we spent $2,500 the first time for this person to help us find a loan, and she did a great job. So as you probably gathered from those comments, the contract, if you're going to finance a property, will what they call here a suspensive condition. We would call a condition maybe just a condition or condition prerequisite. In other words, so if the bank, you make your application with the bank, which is required in the contract, you make a good faith effort, and if they deny you, then typically you're allowed to get your full deposit back and get out of the purchase obligation. Now, another thing we've learned is that France has a lot of quirky properties. They've been around for centuries and centuries, millennium even, and when the properties were built, they weren't done on a very, a lot of them were just communities. People put their houses up wherever they staked out some ground. So, ownership has kind of developed over years in very sort of, very kind of quirky boundaries, quirky ways, and that can lead to some ambiguities in terms of access to the property, boundaries to the property, and that sort of thing. And a lot of times the properties encroach into sort of public areas, so there's a lot of stuff that can cause some issues during the purchase process that you need to look into, that your notaire will look into, and that can cause some issues along the way. So it's very important to understand the purchase contract. I would not just agree to whatever the notaire has advised. For example, we were very fortunate, it wasn't our doing, but very fortunate in one of our contracts that there was a penalty clause for if the purchase wasn't accomplished by a certain date due to one or the other parties failing to live up to their obligations. The penalty clause required that the non-breaching party give the other party a 10-day notice by registered letter, and then if failing that, they could get something like 15,000 euros plus attorney's fees, and also have the option to sue in court to force a sale. And in our situation, we were the non-breaching party, and we went ahead and gave that notice, and it really got the seller in gear. I think she was trying to save some money, but she had some, what would you call it? Her husband had died some time ago, and there were still some issues in terms of getting the property in her name, and it seemed like she was trying to save money by not hiring an attorney, and as a result, it was moving very slowly. And when we sent that letter, it really accelerated the process. It was very helpful. However, in a more recent transaction, that clause was in the contract at my insistence, because it wasn't in there originally. Before I go there, let me mention another thing, is that we do have friends that did not have a penalty clause in their contract, and their purchase just dragged on and on and on until they finally nullified terminated the contract because the seller just would not perform. But they said they wished they had a penalty clause like that in their contract. Then on a more recent transaction, a more recent attempted purchase, I had that, as I mentioned, I had that clause in there at my insistence, but it only extended to the failure to conclude the purchase, and it didn't extend to other breaches. And in this situation, the seller had breached the contract, at least that was my position, our position, in other ways, and it left me in the uneasy position of we were claiming that they had breached. There were certain things that had, well, without me getting into the details, they were trying to insist that we go ahead and purchase. We were claiming that they breached, and they were selling something that was different from what was represented. And so the penalty clause on its face only benefited them if they had been correct in their position, but did not benefit us if we were correct in our position. And ultimately, I think we were correct in our position, and they conceded. But yeah, that we didn't have that hammer. So, and the next time I go into one of these contracts, I'm going to make sure that there's a penalty clause for any type of material breach. Oh yeah, very important. You're probably wondering this all along. What do I do with a French contract if I don't speak French? Well, there's several ways you can translate the contract online. And one way is to, let me start with the easiest way, what I found is the easiest way, which is to upload the document to Google Translator. It's usually the document's going to be in PDF. Google Translator has a upload document feature, and you can use that, specify the languages, and it works quite quickly and will generate you a nice translated document. Of course, there are, you always have to be wary of translation errors. But it is if there's anything that seems awkward or strange, or, it's worth double, or something that's particularly of interest to you, then it's probably worth using a couple of different translators to make sure they all come to the same conclusion. But just for the general purposes of understanding your contract, it works pretty good. It worked pretty good for us. Another way to do it is you can open a PDF document using Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Word will allow you to convert the PDF to a Microsoft Word document, and then Microsoft Word also has a translation feature. It's in the Review tab. So that's another way to go about it. And then there are some, I think, DeepL, D-E-E-P-L. I think they have they have both the free version and the premium version. I'm not sure if the premium version allows you to upload a document or not. But definitely I assume the premium version will. I'm not sure if the free version will. Let me go back to the Notaire again real quick, because I think they're so important. You can find Notaires that are bilingual, and you just have to ask around, look them up online, whatever, and ask if there's a notaire that speaks English. So they can really go to bat for you. They're really critical to the process. They really will help you understand the contract. I guess another thing that's maybe a little of an esoteric point, but was the source of our grievance in the last attempted purchase. There are, in France, like I said, there's a lot of properties that have existed in families for a really long time. They're really historic. They go back hundreds of years prior to, people actually purchasing property and so forth, and were just held by families. So, and then they're being reconfigured for sale. So in our situation, the property was like a townhouse. It looked like a townhouse. It was basically a house that was divided into 2 living units, and been owned by sisters that were living together in a kind of co-ownership situation, given to them by their father, I believe. And they were converting it into basically a condominium, or here it's called the coproprietorship. And they hadn't formed it yet. So there's a bunch of stuff you got to do to make it work as a coproprietorship, and they hadn't formed it. And so this, we didn't really know that first going in when we made the offer, but once we were in, we were like, okay. But they hadn't developed the rules yet. They hadn't done some of the physical separation of electricity and water and so forth. And so that resulted in some unexpected things in the property, the rules that we could not come to agreement with the other proposed co-owner on, and portion of our property being taken away for an access easement to get to the electrical meters and so forth. So yeah, if you get a situation like that, I would stay away from it, or at least make sure that the documents are not standard documents, but really cover and specify everything that's going to be done to make it a co-proprietorship. And that would include, like I said, the rules, the co-ownership rules that apply, the division of electricity and water and all that sort of thing. All right. Let me conclude with a little bit of real estate terminology here in France, and I'm going to write it in the subtitles so that my pronunciation doesn't mislead you. But real estate is referred to as immobilier, and a house is a maison, and like a townhouse where it's adjacent to another house and kind of adjoining another house is called a maison de vie. And condominium is typically referred to as an appartement, like apartment, but an apartment in the U.S. is kind of limited to at least in the Western U.S. is limited to generally to mean a rental unit. That's not so in France. A copropriete is a sort of condominium situation. It's same as appartement, but it refers to the ownership. Basically, it means co-ownership, and that would mean you have condominium rules and that sort of thing, common areas, etc. Another thing is there is not a home inspection process like there is in the U.S. that's done after you agree to a price. Rather, the seller is required to do diagnostics that are published in various documents before they try to sell the property, and those are supplied to you at the time of you're trying to, usually the time of your interest is when the real estate agents have provided it to me, and then usually some more documents flow in after the compromis is signed. And you are of course allowed to go on the property, inspect it yourself. I don't know if you could maybe drag in a home inspector. Probably you could go get a home inspector type of person to come on to the property with you and eyeball things, but it's not made a formal part of the purchasing process the way it is in the U.S. It's done beforehand. Now, one of the diagnostics that's pretty unique to France, it has to do with the energy efficiency of the house. And it gives it a rating both in terms of energy consumption, and the other one is, I think, through gas emissions. And a lot of the homes rate, a lot of the homes are older, so they rate really low on energy efficiency, F or G, somewhere down there. And this can affect your ability to rent the house. So if it's, for example, right now, if it's a rated G, I believe you're not allowed to rent the home, or I forgot what exactly it is. But there's legal bite to it. So unless you are, so be prepared if you're planning to rent the home, then you have to upgrade the home. There's exemptions for certain historic homes and certain homes that are below a certain number of square meters. But you know, be aware of that. That's something you can get more informed about when you go through the purchase process. But you definitely need to be aware of that, especially if you're intending to rent the home. And as I noted, you can, you know, of course, upgrade the energy rating by installing insulation, you know, double pane windows, energy efficient windows. Heating pumps are being promoted. I've heard kind of mixed reviews, mostly negative on those, so do your own research. And of course, there's a couple different kinds of heating pumps, and they tend not to work as well for apartments, which involves like direct air capture or something like that, whereas the heating pumps that work better have a connection with the ground. But anyway, that's a subject for a whole different video, and there's plenty of them out there on that subject alone. So, you know, if you're interested in heating pumps, that's something you want to look into. And anyway, all sorts of energy upgrades you can do to get that rating up. The diagnostics I mentioned cover everything from electricity to asbestos to lead content to geological and, you know, similar flooding risks and so forth in the area, pollution. I have not seen much on structural. There is stuff on electrical, I think I mentioned, termites, another one. But yeah, that's most of the categories are covered by the diagnostics, but not everything. Like I said, I don't think I've seen anything on structural. So, yep, there you have it. That's all I've got. As I mentioned, it's not meant to be a comprehensive learning resource for real estate, but just some of the things that I've learned in our several processes of falling in love with French real estate. Anyway, yeah, it's French. I would add one thing. It's not a quick. It's not a volatile real estate market here like it is in the U.S. It's not a sort of a flipper scenario. There's a lot of things built into the tax code. For example, second homes will cost you more property tax than your primary residence. You will be taxed more heavily if you sell the home, sooner than 5 years. So everything's done to discourage that kind of wheeling, dealing real estate stuff that you have going on in the U.S. And therefore the prices tend to be a bit more stable, and it's treated more like, houses are meant to live in, not to use as cryptocurrency or something. All right, take care. Hope that was helpful, and bon courage.